Hey, everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's the 17th of September, 2019. It's a crazy day here. I'm racing off to the airport as soon as I'm done broadcasting today. So that will serve as a quick reminder to all of you who are watching that the rest of the broadcast this week will be a tad wonky. I want to remind you all of this. So please stay attuned to the Patreon feed. We will let you know times. We will let you know if because there will not, I can tell you this right now, there will not be a broadcast on Friday, no matter what. We are going to endeavor to have a broadcast perhaps tomorrow, maybe Thursday, but they will not be at regular time. So please, follow along, and we will do our very best on Patreon to keep you apprised of that. Okay, it is an extremely busy day here from the context of like actual developing events. So the first thing is that Corey Lewandowski is scheduled to testify today. A letter went to House Judiciary yesterday saying that the president had advised him not to testify about particular matters. And then he himself had tweeted out last night that, he was on the president's side. Lying to Congress is a crime. I will remind you all, lying to Congress is a crime. The fact that the president has instructed Lewandowski to not testify on certain matters is also really questionable, because those of you who have watched this feed for quite some time are aware that executive privilege does not extend to anyone who didn't work in the executive branch of the government with the president. And even then, it's very narrow in terms of how it's construed. Lewandowski never worked in the White House. So his testimony about his time on the Trump campaign is not subject to any form of executive privilege. And the effort to interfere in this particular investigation, as with every other effort to interfere or cause witnesses to evade subpoenas, is per se obstruction of justice. So we have yet another impeachable offense by the president happening in real time. I'm not expecting anything revolutionary to come out of Lewandowski's testimony, nor for that matter, the testimony of Rob Porter, who you all know left the White House after all of his multitude of domestic violence allegations were uncovered. We're just not going to get much out of this. And, again, one has to ask, it begs the question, what's taking so long? So there's that. And Schiff is very plainly not happy about it. And we will have to wait and see what develops next out of this. All right. The good news is that Nadler has come forward in the last 24 hours and been very much all the way in the camp of impeachment. It is clear that Pelosi is still not there. Will she ever be, is my big question. But he's given some statements that are very much indicative of the fact that he's in favor of impeaching the president. As the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, that is very significant, in part because he is the chair of the committee where impeachment starts. And so his statement that he believes the president should be impeached, as opposed to like, we're going to conduct a very thorough investigation, which they should do anyway, honestly, but they already have plenty. Like I said this last night on Twitter, they've had enough information to impeach this president literally for years at this point. So while it is significant that Nadler has made this statement, I want to make it very clear that they're still not moving fast enough. If it were me, just going to tell you, if it were me, plainly it's not, I'd be walking into court today to file a motion to compel against Corey Lewandowski and Rob Porter. So we'll see how long it takes. But I mean, like, law firms do this kind of stuff all the time. You evade a subpoena, you don't show up for a deposition, you're in court that day with papers. So I don't understand the utter recalcitrance, frankly, of not walking into court and fighting your pants off and demanding an expedited schedule and pushing it forward to get the evidence that you're seeking before this committee. So, I'm not going to undermine the fact that he says he's completely in favor of impeachment. Sure, that's a great step in the right direction for Jerry Nadler, but he's not moving fast enough. I mean, I don't think I'm preaching to the choir here. I know, but I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. All right. There was one bit of breaking news that broke literally like 2 minutes before I hit the live button today, which is this. House Judiciary is going to hold a hearing. This is new, on the 23rd of September on emoluments. And that, by the way, I will remind you all, is only 6 days away. There will be a hearing in front of the Judiciary Committee on the president's receipt of money through his hotels as a potential violation of the Emoluments Clause. Again, reminder, that too could be a basis for impeachment. So I'm glad they're doing something about it. Again, I'm like, what's taking you so long? Because there's been pending litigation on emoluments for more than 2 years now. But a little bit of breaking news, a little bit of something to hang your hat on, a little bit of something to move forward with. Okay. One of you asked a question about the ethics complaints that have been filed against Kavanaugh that were then dismissed. You will remember that at the time that he was confirmed, there were something like 84 ethics complaints filed against him for potentially perjuring himself in his confirmation hearings. And that was dismissed by the Court of Appeals that was assigned to review those. Some of you asked this morning if those could form a basis for impeaching Kavanaugh. Yes, they can. Perjury is a high crime and misdemeanor, as is sexual assault. President, Supreme Court Justice. Yes, they could be. So, the ethics complaints that are filed ordinarily against judges are the kinds of things that are there to try to remove somebody from the bench. It's the equivalent of there's two ways you could go after a doctor for medical malpractice, right? You can sue them in a civil court for damages if you've been harmed, and then you can go after their medical license. So think about it in that way, the ethics complaint. And then of course with lawyers, there's even another level if you're just a straightforward lawyer, which is your bar license, right? With this particular now Supreme Court Justice, the ethics complaints against him were filed to try to remove him from the bench. Then, of course, there would be bar complaints to try to remove his license. And then, feasibly, there could also be civil claims against him in court for sexual assault. Statute of limitations is probably run on those. In fact, I'm almost 100% sure it has. But all that said, that's a possibility. And he could also be impeached. So yes, in other words, the foundation of those ethics complaints, particularly the allegations of perjury, could be enough to remove him from the bench if the Senate chose to try, or for that matter, House Judiciary chose to try. All right. So that's that. Other bit of breaking news in the last 24 hours is that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Cyrus Vance, and we've talked about this a little bit before because Cyrus Vance is kind of a curious character in the saga of Trump. Cyrus Vance has in fact filed a state grand jury subpoena for Trump's tax returns. Cyrus Vance, look, we have to be a little careful about this. And, everybody's warned me about this and I didn't really need warning because, I practiced law in New York for more than a decade. One of the things that we all need to be aware of is that Cyrus Vance has a little bit of a hedgy reputation in the past, namely opting not to prosecute Ivanka and Don Jr. for fraud in relation to the number of sold apartments in Trump Soho. He also has a really shaky little bit of history with regard to Harvey Weinstein and Dominique Strauss-Kahn. We'll see what comes of this, but I agree with others that it's very hard to evade a state grand jury subpoena. Trump's going to have a much harder time with this, frankly, than he would with a federal subpoena. And the predictions that have been made by Mimi Rocah and others, which I happen to agree with, is that he may try to get around this by going through federal court and asking the federal court to force the state court to do the right thing. I don't know how successful that's going to be. I wouldn't kind of game that as a positive chance of success, but he may try it anyway. He may try it anyway. The good news, and again, I'm just going to say it. You guys know, I'm always looking for the silver lining. I don't think it's a bad thing that there's now another state operator, the city district attorney for New York City, going after Trump's tax returns. I think as many people going after them as possible is great. And one of them may break, in which case, all we need is those tax returns to be in the public domain before things kind of like crack wide open. You got to ask yourself why it is that this president fights every single effort to reveal his taxes that comes up and has done so for years now. And it can only be because they reflect that he's in business with some very shaky characters and that he's very highly leveraged. We shall see. I don't think it's necessarily the most positive development, but I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. All right. There was a ruling out of Florida yesterday about the Epstein plea agreement. You will all remember there was this plea agreement. This is why Alex Acosta resigned as the Secretary of Labor, because he was so instrumental in it, that prevented the prosecution of Epstein's co-conspirators as well as Epstein in light of Epstein's plea. This was in Florida. This was the case where he served like a very limited term in a place where he left every day to go to his office and then went back. The plea deal was always really bizarre, very far out of left field, didn't make any kind of sense. So yesterday, the judge ruled that that getting the plea overturned was moot because of Epstein's death. Now, I'm just going to tell you that with regard to co-conspirators, I'm not sure this holds water. There is reasoning in the opinion as to why dismissing the plea agreement is moot because Epstein, the person who was subject to it and imprisoned because of it, is dead. I am not sure that this opinion is going to withstand appeal. And my bet is that there's going to be an appeal of this because his victims in Florida deserve the right to go after his co-conspirators. I'll just add, the idea that you never prosecute co-conspirators based on one person's plea agreement is crazy. Like, it's just like unheard of in criminal law. So, I'm not sure that's going to stand, and that aspect of the opinion is going to stand, and we're going to have to see what develops out of that. There's obviously a very serious rationale for mooting the case based on the fact that he's dead as it goes to him. As to co-conspirators, it's a bit of a different story. So again, I'm expecting an appeal on that, and we will see what happens in the next stage of litigation. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about today, just from the standpoint of where we find ourselves, is that we do have a lot of ongoing hearings right now, and it is going to be worthwhile to pay attention to them. Like I said, I don't expect anything from Lewandowski and Portman, but I do think that we're going to see something out of this new emoluments hearing that's coming up. And we're going to see some additional public evidence coming up with various people who have been called to testify, both before House Intelligence, because that's Schiff. Let's not forget, there's that crazy whistleblower situation in the DNI that we talked about yesterday. Rachel talked about it a bit more last night. The fact that it now appears that the president or someone very close to him engaged in a massive national intelligence disclosure of some kind that caused a whistleblower to come forward and risk his or her job to file a formal complaint is something that we can't take our eyes off of. I, for one, in addition to the fact that it just looks really bad from what we know already, I have a very bad gut feeling about what this pertains to. There's going to be a hearing about that one way or another. So again, one of the keys here is that there's a lot of moving pieces going on right now with regard to impeachment and various investigations. I know, I've said it on this broadcast. I know you all feel the same way, that this is not moving fast enough. Nonetheless, it is really important that as these hearings happen and the evidence starts to make its way into the public domain, that we amplify it, that we share it, that it is explained in layperson's language that everyone can understand. Because the gravity of what we're dealing with inside these hearings, I know, again, this is obvious to everybody who's paying attention here, but the gravity of what we are dealing with is serious business. And, the fact that the DNI and the executive branch of our government is, in particular with regard to this whistleblower complaint, are covering up the actual whistleblower report that was filed properly. Everybody admits it was filed properly. The House Intelligence Committee has access to it per se, and they're still not turning it over, is something we should absolutely pay attention to. So lots of ongoing developments today. Lots, like I said at the top of the broadcast, lots of moving pieces on the action front. Important to just stay focused on the news as it breaks from the standpoint of the actual evidentiary developments that implicate the president and his people. All right. We'll remind you all, because so hundreds of you have logged on since we started. I am leaving right now to go to the airport and I'm on the road for the rest of the week. We may, I can't make promises on this because what I'm working on this week is really insane, but and awesome. But we may have a broadcast Wednesday and Thursday. We will not, no matter what, have a broadcast on Friday because I'm working and then getting on a plane. So just know that you need to pay attention to the Patreon feed over the next couple of days for times, news, etc. I will do my very best to be here for all of you. If at all possible, I just can promise you that it's probably not going to be at regular time. All right. So much love to all of you. And I can't wait to share what we've got coming up when I can. And if you follow me on Twitter, I've already been instructed by one of my my partners on this project to keep my mouth shut. All right. So I will check in with all of you one way or another over the next few days. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for your support on Patreon. Thank you so much to those of you who were talking about the Patreon broadcast yesterday over on Instagram, where you can also follow me if you don't already. And much love. I'll talk to all of you in the next couple of days. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.